Sandra Gesing. I'm the director of the Center of Excellence for Science Gateways, SGX3. And this is our monthly webinar series. Today we talk about blueprint factories of SGX3 organized. And we will have next month, we won't have a monthly webinar, because we have our conference. So I hope to see many of you at the conference in Bozeman, beautiful Bozeman. And we have also from next week online tutorials. So the online tutorials, you need to register, but it's for free if you just go to the tutorials, have a look at our website, sciencegateways.org, and then gateways 24, sorry. And with that, I will start to share my screen. And go to my slides. And start the slideshow. So everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we are talking today about blueprint factories. I'm very excited about this topic. So I give a short introduction. Jeanette Sperhac will talk about the AI and Science Gateway Blueprint Factory, and Nancy Maron will talk about the Sustainability Blueprint Factory. And so for everyone who might have not heard about Science Gateways yet, so what is a Science Gateway? So it connects to expensive resources and data. So you might have heard about it with HPC, but it's also with lab instruments. It's really, it can be a portal to data. And often scientists also, and write codes to utilize these expensive lab instruments, HPC, distributed computing data structures, and then they have these audiences. This uses it. So a big part of really a science gateway is its audience and the user communities which are using it. So what does a science gateway really do? And so if you look at it, so for researchers and educators and different communities, it really connects them. It is a collaborative platform. The examples you see here is, for example, students, teams doing real science and are mentored by scientists and collaborate online from around the world. That is one of our examples for Science Gateway. Open topography, delivers all this data and illustrates that directly via maps. Visualizations is often a big topic in science gateways. So it's really providing access to research software, providing access to use lab instruments, wider infrastructures, data infrastructure, research infrastructure in general, and it lowers the barrier to educational materials and research. So if we look at the Center of Excellence for Science Gateways, we are 2 years old now, and but we are in this space already since 2016. So SGCI was the Science Gateways Community Institute, and the last 2 years we continued at the Center of Excellence. So one thing is we really give practical advice. We have sustainability training, like a Focus Week and Jumpstart. We have technology selection consulting, usability and graphic design consulting. It's really about that communities, that PIs, that researchers, educators can ask us for advice. Then we have big communities events like the annual Gateways Conference. So Bozeman, it's coming up in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Then the blueprint factories, we are talking about that today. That is really thought leadership. We have community surveys. We have these monthly webinars. You are part of this. And we have presentations of SGX3 on the road. That is like going to communities, really to increase also the number of domains we can attract and And the third big area is the career development, workforce development, and faculty student hackathon, summer internship experience. So the one is just finished in July, beginning of August. Is that so? Yeah, I thought about this topic a little bit. So what are blueprint factories really doing? So, and the mission is really to advance science gateway capabilities. And we want blueprint factories for the next generation of CI solutions. So we are thinking with blueprint factories, what do we need to develop in the next 5, or let's say 5 to 10 years to meet the needs in 10 years of researchers and the community. And yeah, well, just as entertainment, I put the blueprint factories for next generation CI solutions into an AI image generator. And I used as basis a contemporary architecture. Okay. So that is how, AI sees this at the moment. The future architecture, the cast definitely looks different. It looks all, future architecture. Okay, that is the blueprint factory from the future, and this is steampunk. So here, these are blueprint factories, how AI image generators see them as next generation CI solutions. So the overview, what is a blueprint factory, how we defined it in SGX3. So it is 12 to 18 months collaborative workshops, working as a team together. So it's CI professionals, scientists, and infrastructure operators. And to really think about what are the pain points and how can we really discover what is needed. And these are, so we planned for interviews and surveys. And we, at the end of a blueprint factory, after 12 to 18 months, we will write white papers with the CI blueprints, really with a core team. So the core team is between 5 to 8 people. So we have 5 core CI experts, about 5 domain experts per factory. And we are really looking into, have a wide interviews into the different communities. So how does it work with blueprint factories? So first, we need to identify domain experts and contacts, what to build the core team, to really see, for example, we will talk about AI. So Jeanette will present AI in science gateways. Nancy will present the sustainability one. So they have different domain experts and contacts. Then they are to create interview guides. So because we want to conduct per blueprint factory minimum of 30. Some plans were also around more 50. And then we will synthesize the results, intermediate one and final stages, and maybe do also wider surveys. So that was in the original plan, but per blueprint factory, we decide what are the steps. Maybe we have more focus group. Maybe it's, not only one-to-one interviews. So there are different possibilities. And so the idea is really to drive CI innovation with these blueprint factories. So the result should be that we have practical white papers that address the community needs, and not the current needs, but really the future needs. And that we have actionable solutions, because that is often hard to find. If we find out the pain points, it's not always obvious, well, how can we solve this? So with the discussion with experts and with the community, we hope we have then really the chance to have these blueprints for actionable solutions. So, and we have another aspect of it is that the result and the impact is that we have an enhanced collaboration between the CI professionals and researchers, because we brought them together into a blueprint factory and with the interviews, and that it's really forward-looking studies for the next generation science gateways, so that we also can extend the community, because we have a lot of success already reaching computer scientists or engineers or science gateway developers and also providers. So we still have really the need to reach domains. I think the blueprint factories can really help us to extend our community beyond our current domains and the current community we have. And with that, I stop sharing and give the word to Jeanette. Absolutely.
Yay. Okay. I'm gonna keep this on the less than scary side and not maximize my screen. So please excuse the dust. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeanette Sperhac. I am, I guess, the factory foreman for the AI Blueprint Factory. And we've been really capably introduced by Sandra. I thank you for that, Sandra. So I can tell you a little bit about our first steps we've made, give you some updates about where we are. And so what we're going to cover is the following. Again, I'm in charge of the Artificial Intelligence Blueprint Factory for SGX3. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the focus group we used as a sort of a kickoff for this exercise. And then we'll discuss status a little bit. Okay, so starting out, you all probably know what science gateways are, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You know that these are web-based platforms that we use to facilitate access to data and software and computing resources. But here's the thing, right? We're there to serve researchers, educators, and students, and so forth. And we need to stay in touch with them to find out what their needs are and what they anticipate their needs will be going into the future. We want to continue to be able to deliver the resources and the compute cycles, the software, the data they need. So that's part of what the Blueprint Factories are about, is finding out what people need, and so that we can deliver it. So again, each of these exercises is focused on a specific emerging topic. So mine is AI. More about that in a minute. But our charter here is to determine what technical capabilities we need to support so that future research can be supported, and then kind of create a blueprint for how are we going to do that for future science gateways? How are we going to offer this tooling, offer these capabilities? So that sounds good. Artificial intelligence, right? Kind of a big topic. So this is something that's a bit of a challenge. On the one hand, we can imagine adding some tools that make use of artificial intelligence into gateways to make them more usable by our users, right? Stuff like just to keep it simple, chatbots, although nothing simple about building a chatbot that does exactly what you want, right? So on the one hand, we have that. On the other hand, we know that we want to enable researchers to really dig in and run big AI workloads. We want them to be able to take their enormous data sets and do crazy creative things with them, right? All kinds of different sorts of workloads need to be supported on all kinds of different sorts of hardware, because by domain, that's going to vary. By AI subtype or subdomain, that's going to vary. So there's a whole lot here. And in some ways, we have to make some choices. So you'll see some of this falling out as we start to talk about where we've begun with this particular inquiry. So where did we start? Well, in 2023 at the PERC conference, that's Practice and Experience in Advanced Research Computing, this team held a BOF session, a birds of a feather session. So let's unpack some of those terminologies and definitions. So a birds of a feather session is not a talk per se, it's kind of a gathering, right? You have an interest in a topic, you show up to really to participate in discussion about it, and to meet with others who are also interested in that topic. So the BOF was about integrating AI into science gateways. So we had a good bunch of folks show up. This is a research computing conference. So we saw an audience that would be typical of research computing. So let's take a look at who came to the BOF, what we did in that BOF. So there were 27 participants altogether. Most of them had heard of science gateways. We'd hope so. That was in the title of the session. Most of them had heard of SGCI and or SGX3. So that's a good start. We also found, we polled people as to their job titles. And again, it's a research computing conference. So we are seeing folks like software engineers, scientists, system administrators. There's that big bin that's labeled other. And I am told that in that bin were people like user support. So the folks that would work on the big national compute resources, helping users, making sure they're able to compile things, run their jobs, get their error messages. So that was certainly a part of our population. Also, we had an NSF program manager, and they checked that other box because that was how they identified in the scope of the possible job titles here. So it's a good research computing audience that we spoke to. We asked them a couple of warm-up questions just to sort of prime the pump, right? We're talking about AI and science gateways. So what tasks can be most improved using AI? And this is the raw data that they responded with. You'll notice that user support is big, but if you look down, you see that you see boring tasks and repetitive and menial things. So people would love to have the AI do the data cleansing, right? There's a little bit of a theme there. People would love to have an assist from some of these methods. Okay, how about fields that will be most affected by AI? And really, we've named pretty much all the fields that you might think of, and everybody ended up landing on all. They're picturing this as being a big deal, right? Everybody's going to be affected by AI. Let's make sure we reflect this in what we offer on Science Gateways. So let's get to the heart of the session here. There in the BOF, we divided people up into four groups or several groups and rotated them among these 4 focus questions. The idea was this: we want to collect some data. We want to get people thinking. Here's a research computing audience. What do they think about these focus questions on AI? So the topics were as follows, and we asked them to just write down the things that came to mind, the problems, the issues, the questions, the things they'd like to see. Mention some novel modes of computation that are presented when you think of AI workloads. That was the first topic. The second topic was what kinds of issues come up with data sharing and data access for AI workloads. The third was how do we broaden access to AI? The fourth was what can we do to improve science gateways with AI? Now, once again, this is where you start to see the big split, which is on the one hand, can we use AI tools, little, maybe smaller scale things on the gateway itself to help people to use it better, to help people, to guide people. And on the other hand, how can we get people running AI workloads in a way that it can contribute to the research? So sort of 2 forks, and we'll see this come up. So we got a lot of data out of that exercise. Total of 314 raw responses came back from our participants. We rotated them among the questions, and everybody made some recommendations and comments. So on average, there were 26 responses for each of 12 disparate groups, right, rotating through. So we sat down and did some summarization and some interpretation of these data, sliced it a couple of different ways, and what we wound up with in the end was the following. We organized all of these comments after summarization and so forth by category, and then ranked those so that we took the top 4 in terms of number of instances, right? And then we broke these things down into themes as well. And I'm just going to walk you through those top 4 categories. So we dropped the low counts of categories, and so we're going to talk about that. You'll see these categories over in the colorful box on the side. So the sub boxes are scaled by the count of entries in each, and the prompt gives you a summarization of what the category describes. So category 1 was interactive user assistance. Category 2 was gateway usability. There's obviously some relation between those two, but you got to divide this up somehow. And this is where we started. We have then finally some more really AI workload kinds of areas, data access and handling, and compute and training, where training here is shorthand for model training, right? AI workload type stuff. So let's dig into each of these just a little bit. For our user assistance topics, as I mentioned, we sort of attached a topic to each of the items listed under these categories. So data preprocessing was big, right? And this is where you're thinking about AI workloads. People would love to have some help thinking about how they're going to do all the deduplication and all the massaging of the data correctly and appropriately so that they can use those data in AI workloads. Now, several of our other user assistance topics were also slanted this way. Can I use an AI? Can we imagine a way that it can be used to help us select compute resources? Where's the queue the shortest in a place that would be suitable for the job type I've got? How about data set selection? Can the AI somehow make some suggestions as to where I can find data sets and how I might use them? How about workflow composition, where we put the pieces together for the AI workflow and we have an AI assistant that helps us? So people really dug into this. You'll notice that also, though, we did have that natural language chatbot brought up. So is there a way for us to make a little tool that we can put on these gateways that will help users to navigate or the like? Okay, so that's our user assistance. A related category really is gateway usability. And here you'll see that again, we've got a little of this and a little of that. On the one hand, people would love to cache previous computations and bring them back out again. You don't have to have AI for that, but it's an interesting angle, right? Natural language translation again comes up. And then is there a way to have the AI guide your data exploration, dig into your user history to make suggestions, perform user support or customization? Lots of cool ideas there. And this is, again, how do we use the AI to make the gateway more usable, more friendly for users to get done what they need to do? So data access and handling was our next category. And here you've really definitely got a split, because on the one hand, people would love to use the AI to do things like data cleaning. Wow, could I write something that would help me with data cleaning? Or better yet, have us write it and you can use it. Data cleaning, access to training data, and these kinds of things on the one hand. And on the other hand, people are saying, hey, wait a bit, I'm concerned about data ethics and data provenance. I'm thinking about protected health information. So on the one hand, there are good things that we can do. And on the other hand, there are cautionary, there are concerns that we might have. So things that people brought up. All right, our last category before we did a cutoff was looking at compute and training. And this is really looking directly at those AI workloads that we would love to have a way to assist researchers in running, right? In the same way that we assist people in their batch job submission by being able to run things through a gateway, wouldn't it be great if we could assist people in their AI workloads just to make life easier so they can do more science and less of the crank turning, right? Less of the CI. So people wanted, again, job scheduling assistance. We've seen that in a previous category. Guiding parameter selection, predicting simulation results. So again, how can I have an AI that helps me to use the substantial machinery needed to run some of these large AI workloads? That was a great interest of participants in the BOF. So a couple of summaries, although we've touched on this a little bit already. The participants who came to PERC and came to our BOF about AI and science gateways recognize that we can help address challenges using AI on these gateways. We can do things like user assistance. Hopefully we can deliver that, and model training assistance and other kinds of things where people would just love to have a smoother ride to their science, right? But on the other hand, there are other challenges that are surfaced here. The ethics and concerns related to that with their data provenance, protected data and access to that, and so forth. So two kinds of challenges there. And similarly, two kinds of opportunities in a large scale, right? BOF participants considered both that gateways might be made more usable by integrating some AI widgets or tools, right? And on the other hand, might be useful in streamlining the process of using AI. So that's not going to be a chatbot, but that's going to be something that helps us to guide data pre-processing. Now, I have to mention, obviously we're thinking big here. These are big, substantial pieces of work that people are musing about. And where we're going to go from here, of course, is looking more into what are current research practitioners doing. So this is dreaming. Now we're going to have to move a little bit more into the practicalities. But these are the things we learned from our community that showed up to the BOF and gave us their feedback on these things. Now, status and next steps. Where are we with the Blueprint Factory for AI? Well, we have convened our core team for the AI Blueprint Factory, and we've had several meetings, both to talk about the general charter that we're under here, the goals, to talk about thinking through who our interview prospects might be and making some plans. We've done a little bit of training and consideration with Nancy Maron, who you'll hear from shortly, about how do we plan good interview questions and how do we recruit an appropriate population to interview so that we're really sampling our community in a way that'll get us some good answers and some good information about what's really needed by the research community. So this all requires a lot of thought, and we're getting some fabulous guidance and digging into those questions now. So I wanted to just recognize the AI Blueprint Factory, and here's our cyber infrastructure core team participants. And I want to recognize our domain science core team. So all these folks are working together to point out, people that we can speak with, people that might be good resources, and to help us to unpack and consider the many questions and issues here. So that's what I've got on our AI Blueprint Factory at present, the sort of high-level view. If you want to be an interview subject or a panel member or suggest new topics, I'll just shoot my mouth off and say, give us a contact. Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. It was a great overview. And yeah, if people have questions, you can put them or ask them in between now, or we just also go now to Nancy, and we have time at the end of the hour or so. And after Nancy's talk. So thank you very much, and I give it to Nancy.
Thank you. And my apologies in advance. I'm going to try to speak clearly but softly because I'm at an airport. I also, before I get started, first, hello to everyone that I've had a chance to meet already, and to those of you who I'm just meeting now. I'm Nancy Maron. My firm is called Blue Sky to Blueprint. I've been a partner with SGCI and now SGX3 since the start, and just delighted to get to work on a lot of different things with the team. I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Val, who is on the call today. Val, if you want to just say a quick hello, so folks see who you are.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, great. And yeah, and so I'm going to give you a little update on where we are with the Sustainability Blueprint Factory. It's a little bit different, I should mention, from what you will be hearing about with some of the blueprint factories that are domain specific. And Sandra and Jeanette both mentioned that domain specificity was actually a really big deal for those. I asked, and if perhaps something like sustainability could be included, because it's not really the same thing. It very definitely crosses all domains, very stubbornly crosses all domains, and even crosses domains that are not even in things that are close to natural or physical sciences or technology. the issues around digital sustainability and the ongoing success and kind of value of digital initiatives is something that shows up in a lot of ways across every discipline, essentially. Any discipline where someone's creating something that looks like a gateway, a portal, a data set, a data repository, a collection, there are going to be sustainability issues. And so I'm very grateful to have a chance to dig in on that. I should mention that for some context, I've actually been working in this area for a while. Over a decade ago, I published with colleagues a whole bunch of case studies that talk about what makes digital initiatives sustainable. And again, often these are things that have to do with good business practice, like a laser focus on paying attention to users and their needs, and in addition, kind of creative problem solving around financial models. What I'm fascinated by in this phase is having the chance to go back and acknowledge that some of the challenges may be similar, but really spending a lot of time looking on what the new challenges. So what you're going to hear about is a little bit about methodology, what we've been able to observe as persistent challenges on the question of sustaining digital initiatives. And then the exciting part, I certainly hope, will be areas of solutions and finally some next steps. So we started this about a year ago, or maybe a little bit earlier than some of the other ones, but we have still a bit ways to go before we're done. So the first phase involved interviewing experts, and that could be people in all different realms, but started with the core team at SGX3 with a real focus on cyber infrastructure and technology and science gateways, and then extended that to work with other people who are, for example, in IT roles at universities, even in publishing and with libraries, any place on campuses we see that sustainability becomes an issue. The next phase has been what we've been doing this year and are still doing, which are running focus groups. So instead of just doing interviews, we've done kind of a hybrid approach. And so we did several interviews earlier this year with people who represent decision makers at what I think of as a host institution, and the institution that's actually hosting digital initiatives, science gateways, to ask them what they see as happening. And then I'm going to tell you about what some of these other solution categories are. A focus group on what I think about as new approaches altogether. We're talking about things that are not at all business models, but actually just processes and ways of working. Coming this month and next month will be interviews with funders, because as we know, funders have a great power to influence what happens with how digital initiatives are built and how they are potentially sustained. And finally, it may be a little surprising, and I'd love feedback on this, whereas much of my early work had to do with looking at researcher challenges, PI challenges with sustaining their own gateways. Through the work with SGX3, I think we see a lot of that every day in the people we work with in all different settings, whether it's the conference, the training, the consulting. Rather, this year, I'm hoping to partner with the leadership group at SGX3 to participate in a larger scale survey, to kind of ask those questions at scale. So finally, what are we doing with this? At the end of the day, we will generate a white paper talking about what we have found and hopefully what new interesting areas of solutions are to support digital initiatives, and some tools. And those might very well look like an annotated reading list, or for example, a health check tool, questions that you could ask to see how your project is going. So I feel like looking at this, I'm feeling tired by seeing all the copy on the slide, so I'm guessing you might be too. But just to put a definition of sustainability out there, and that's the one you see at the bottom. When we were thinking about sustainability, I referenced business models, but the key part of the definition is really that we're looking for a logic by which people running science gateways can identify recurring sources of support. And that's probably the broadest way to put it. So those are holistic solutions. Those are not just where's the next grant coming from, but it's how am I identifying what's valuable in the gateway so that I can continue attracting users, I can continue attracting supporters, whether it's in kind or financial. So when we say sustainability, that's really the space we're operating in. Everyone feels that if there's a value to a gateway, we don't want the gateway to shut down for lack of support. You've heard a definition of gateways, so I won't mention that too much, but I will mention a little bit about these campus stakeholders because as I mentioned, PIs and the people and research engineers, people who are building and supporting the gateways are really important. But often just as important is the level of support that you are getting from the institutions where you're living. And so finding out what's actually going on at a level, administrative level up from an individual project lead is really important and will tell us a lot. So what are some of these persistent challenges? And this is a result of, again, a combination of interviews conducted to date and the 3 focus groups that have already been run. So it's a combination of these things. The first thing is that we're still seeing that there's a lot of different ways to offer support for gateways on campuses. But that doesn't mean it's a solved problem. So for example, we still hear that it's much more exciting to fund a new project than it is to support an existing project. And that tells you a lot about where the money is available. We have heard about projects that are very actively being developed that are hopefully creating solutions so that not every PI has to create everything themselves. But there are still a lot of different places on a campus where this work is happening, which means it can be difficult to access the support. And it also may mean that it may not be delivered as efficiently as it could be. We hear a lot about how important it is not to build something twice. We don't want to have everyone developing all elements of their gateway. But we still hear that there are some incentives in the system, and that could be a funder question that mean that there are still projects that get built that might be a little too similar to things that exist already. So the question here is what can happen to help strongly encourage PIs to be building on and extending the work of others rather than building something that somewhat exists already. So this is going to be something we'll continue to ask about, particularly at the funder level. Questions around staff, maybe these will never go away. To some extent, they may not. We've seen a lot of things that have progressed in terms of the recognition of the role of the research software engineer. That's a big thing that's happened in the last decade, but I'm not so sure it's made it that much easier for everyone to, everyone working on a digital project, first of all, to be acknowledged, and second of all, to be fairly compensated for that work. And that's an issue that goes all the way up to the PI. We still hear about stories of people who are kind of doing this in their spare time, or maybe on paper are giving 10%, but in reality, that 10% is actually many, many more hours than 10% you would think would equal. And then there's a question of how we measure the value of this. So, having an audience, having a vocal bunch of supporters is great, but I still think there's a piece of work to be done to define and to continue to value this work. You start to see this being valued in terms of promotion and tenure review, but I think the questions of exactly what metrics are used and how fully this is being done, I think are still actively being discussed. So the solution thing I mentioned, there are a lot of problems and there are always going to be problems, but what I really hope this piece of work can help surface are categories of approaches that we think are going to do something a bit different and bigger scale. And so what I mean by that, just by counterexample, is SGX3, and including myself, I spend a lot of time coaching and working with individual PIs and teams. And we work and we help people to figure out how to problem solve around specific challenges that they have with specific gateways. And that's fantastic, but that's an approach that literally means helping one person at a time or one project at a time. So are there bigger, broader types of solutions that might just help everybody out a little quicker? And I really am asking that as a question, and I'd be delighted again to have people's thoughts on that in this fall. But I'll give you a sense of the areas we're looking at, and that's what's guiding how we're creating these focus groups. So one big category is just the notion of open source. One of the big trends we've noticed fairly recently is the investment by Sloan and Ford to create open source program offices, like investing in locations on campus that are funded, that have staff attached to them, that can help educate and advocate for the use of open source software. So this is pretty interesting. I feel like a half a generation ago, those might have been called digital humanities centers, which had a similar flavor of kind of support there. But today it's really about open source, and it's getting at the level of code, and again, getting at the question of if this is structured differently down the road, these gateways will be easier to work on across the community and easier to support. So that's an area I think that's fascinating. We're going to have to look a little bit further to see to what extent that actually theory of change is actually working. Another area is what I'm calling this open, like an open process. And we've met with a couple of people who are running projects, OpenScapes is one of them, where they're actually trying not just to change the way code is structured, but they're actually talking to people about how they do their work with each other. And it's about creating an environment that is kind of founded on sharing, supporting each other. It's a very much more of a kinder, gentler work setting. I'll be sharing more about this later as we start more publicly sharing findings from this. But it's a super interesting idea because it's not really a technical solution at all. It's definitely a big culture shift. But they've already seen a lot of positive movement, and they're not working with small teams. They're working with teams from NASA and NOAA and other big tech agencies. And then there's other big kinds of approaches. Like, for example, where are we seeing collaboration that's happening not just among individual PIs, but among their institutions? How can you build support for an idea, a major investment? And for example, some of these things out of the other tech blueprint factories may be examples of this. But how do you start that at the beginning so that there is a kind of built-in support among a broader coalition? And finally, of those solutions, which of those are actually shared infrastructure so that we're actually creating the platforms and approaches so that we can take some jobs off of the table for PIs who have other things to do. So our next steps involve a round of interviews with funders that are going to ask these questions. We're asking everyone the same set of, very similar set of questions. How have things changed in the last decade for you around sustainability? What do you see as the big solution areas that you think are the most fruitful, and what would you like to see? So we'll be doing that next month, and then by the end of the year, drafting a paper that we can share. So that is it. So thank you, everybody. Glad I was able to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Yeah, thank you again, both speakers, for the excellent talks. So yeah, the floor is open for questions, so you can raise your hand or type into the chat, or just talk. Do you have any questions? Mona?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking of for the AI Blueprint Factory in the results from the BOF was wondering if anybody talked about sort of how to interpret the results. I think it sounds like we're at the stage where sort of AI in general is at. We're understanding how to clean the data, but then we haven't really moved in bulk into understanding the data and how to show the user who has to interpret the result really a good picture of what the result really means. I was wondering if anybody talked about that.
So interpreting your results and not just saying, let's visualize this. Yeah, one of the things about our BOF, people are given the instructions, right? Go ahead, be crazy, pie in the sky, be speculative. And so people went all out. You know, it would be lovely if we could have these things. They're hard, right? I'm trying to think. You know, we had 300 some individual responses. Did anybody talk about interpretation? Perhaps not directly, but you're absolutely right. It's key.
Okay, thanks.
Oh. Jonathan, this is a clapping, not a hand up for a question. Okay, with
I don't
that.
know how to remove it, so I will
Okay.
leave it be. Yeah, so quick question on the sustainability angle, or the sustainability work. I have recently been thinking about, for the project that I work on in particular, we've been looking into moving out of being housed in a particular lab at a particular institution. And one of the challenges we've been thinking through for sustainability is we have some existing funding streams within, our existing lab, but a potential challenge is if we want to maintain those funding streams moving forward, that generally has to turn into a contracting relationship if it's being managed by an external entity. But we also want to be able to provide this infrastructure not necessarily as pay to play. So it's a little bit hard to know, like, has there been any discussion or thought about how you can funnel money to infrastructure from, for example, existing grants that rely on it, even if that funding is not necessarily strictly required to be able to access it, but it is like still, you want to be able to sustain these this kind of infrastructure because it is useful for the research that you're doing.
That's a lot of pieces. I'm trying to assimilate everything you just said to give you a useful answer here. So are the pieces, where's the funding coming from? Are you talking about, look, I feel like I missed a key part here to understand. I mean, I think one of the
way that our project is currently funded is through generally unrestricted grants to the academic lab that we're currently run through. And the concern is if we wind up moving to be run by an independent organization, how we can continue to be able to take advantage of those grant funds, because we want to be able to continue to sustain it. But it needs to look, as far as the institution is concerned, it needs to look like a contract, which means that there has to be services, like it has to be in return for services that are needed. But if we don't want to require payment to have access to our infrastructure, which looks something like a gateway, how we'd manage that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's an obvious, straightforward question. There's often a moment where it's in your best interest to have some kind of independence, because that allows you to pursue other revenue streams. But in exchange, that kind of burdens you with direct costs you might not have had otherwise. I feel like that might be the category of issue you're running into. And so I actually am not sure if I know an actual answer to, without knowing a little bit more about the circumstance. But yeah, it's not necessarily an easy switch to flip. We know some examples of staying at a university, but kind of taking on a different, like a 501c, like a not-for-profit status, have to have some degree of independence. You might be eligible for different kinds of grants, but then I don't know. I think it's complicated. I think the math often looks like also, if the independence ends up sending too many more direct costs to you, it may kind of neutralize the benefit of that independence. So there's usually like some kind of a financial analysis would have to look at something like that. Yeah, anyway, I feel like I probably don't know what you're talking about well enough to give you a better answer than that for right now, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Mona?
And maybe also just jumping in before, sorry, Mona, we do have, as the Science Gateway Center of Excellence, the Blueprint Factories does have this sustainability focus, but we also have training on sustainability concepts, which it sounds like from what you've brought up, Jonathan, you have a very specific sustainability concept or need that you're exploring. So this would be that avenue to explore that concept further. So what Nancy is doing is, going around talking to stakeholders around the theology of sustainability at large. And if you wanted to directly have actionable items around sustainability, this would be your space to work with consultants like Nancy for a week. We also have another consultant, Juliana Casavan, who would be on site. So I posted a link in chat if you're interested in learning more. But we have these annually throughout the year, and signing up for our newsletter would be the best way to receive information for the next one.
Great, thanks, Claire. Mona?
Yeah, so maybe a follow-up on Jonathan's question is sustainability. There are different ideas, and I was wondering, Nancy, if through all the experiences that you've had, if there are successful paths that you have seen that other Science Gateway who are looking for ways to sustain can go forward. Yeah, if you know, if freemium is a good way to do it, or if there are, I don't know, examples of really successfully sustained projects that you think others could use to model.
Yeah, so this is, I'm kind of going to cheat here also because I'm looking at the clock, but also because I like these reports. So I did a couple of reports that involved case studies, and we chose the projects in them because they were doing something that seemed like it was a useful example, not like anyone would take the exact example and try to implement it word for word, but examples of good behavior and like good practice that were working. And so like when I often use the eBird project at Cornell's Lab of Ornithology as a teaching example, just to show a good, healthy logic of recurring support and increasing investment in value to users. But the study that's published in has 12 different case studies that are very detailed. So that's actually still a pretty good report to look at. And the kinds of, I mean, the short version is that the kinds of things that make an act like a commercial business good are often some of the same things we like to see even in gateways. And that means, again, paying attention to users, not just what we think they might like, but what they actually are demonstrating that they have a need for. Being very alert to the competitive environment so that we're not building something that's a little too similar to everything else out there. Another category is being really alert to how much of the stuff that we need to create the gateways is actually being offered generously by the universities and how much we have to pay for out of pocket. And then finally, there's a section we do often that has to do with not being snobby about where the funding and the support comes from. You know, let's look under every rock. It can be grants, it can be university support, but there can be suitable revenue models and revenue generation that does not conflict with open access mandates and missions. So we're not going to say no to anything until we explore if it's possible. So that's the suite of, I just actually outlined what I think are the suite of behaviors, and underlying that is, I hate to say it, but having a director who has actual time to do all this stuff, because this is not easy work. And when I see like, oh, it's the executive director or it's the PI and they have 10% of their time allocated, you're like, no reasonable person running a brand new startup like would think that made any sense. Like, so it's a suite of issues. And so when I mentioned that I'm fascinated in this piece of current work for the Blueprint Factory, I hate to say this, I want to almost admit defeat. I want to say, you know what, let's stop trying to make researchers into business owners. They don't have the time to do it. They have other things they need to do. We're asking them to do way too many things. Let's see how we can have the universities create solutions that take some of those jobs off the table. Let's see if we can have some of that happen at the funder level, because we've seen it in Europe. There are examples of this where could be a repository or things like that that happen at a grander scale that actually do make things a little bit easier for the researchers. So what can happen in the US about that? And then to what extent is open source, I don't know, is encouraging people to use it, source that's open code and to write open source code is that really a solution, or is it just laying groundwork that we hope will make things easier down the road one day? You know, what actually has to happen to encourage that to take place in the first place, but also to encourage the communities to engage and participate. So what's like that next layer of solution, as opposed to just keep hammering away at the overburdened PIs who are running these projects? So to the extent that you yourselves may have thoughts on what that next layer of solution might look like, I would genuinely love to hear other thoughts. I share the 4 areas I think are interesting to look into, but I guarantee there are more out there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy and Jeanette again. And I know, Nancy, you have to run. You wrote me already 7 minutes ago. I have to run in 2 minutes. So thank you for going to your board office. You probably have to board now, so we let you.
I may have to go, but if Mona has a question, what am I going to do? Not talk to Mona? Okay.
Of course.
It's really, really nice to see you guys.
Very nice seeing you. Thank you both again very much. We are at the top of the hour. I want to be mindful of, the time of everyone. So hopefully see a lot of you at the conference, and follow up with us with a newsletter, or Jonathan, maybe with the focus week. And yeah, the recording will be available, the slides will be available, I think, at least Jeanette and mine, and Nancy, yeah, you tell me whether yours will be available. And with that, many thanks for coming.